In August 1944, Adolf Hitler gave an order that could have erased Paris from the map. Bridges across the Seine were wired with explosives. Historic landmarks were prepared for demolition. German troops were told if they could not hold the city, they were to leave nothing behind but rubble and fire. The City of Light, a place that had survived revolutions, invasions, and centuries of war, had become a hostage to a collapsing regime. For 48 terrifying hours, it looked like Paris might burn. It didn't. Not because the danger wasn't real, and not because the explosives weren't ready. Paris survived because of chaos in the streets, a race against time, and one German general who made a decision that could have cost him his life. By the summer of 1944, Nazi Germany was in retreat on every front. Allied forces had broken out of Normandy and were racing across France. In the east, the Red Army was crushing German armies and pushing toward the Reich itself. Hitler's vision of a 1,000-year empire was collapsing in a matter of months, and his response was fury. If Germany could not win, then its enemies would inherit ruins. Hitler began issuing scorched earth orders, demanding that infrastructure, factories, and even entire cities be destroyed rather than captured intact. Paris, though no longer crucial militarily, held enormous symbolic value. Letting the Allies march in triumph would be a humiliation. Destroying it would be a final act of defiance that the world would never forget. To carry out his will, Hitler appointed General Dietrich von Choltitz as the military commander of Paris. His orders were simple and terrifying. Defend the city, and if it must fall, make sure nothing of value remained. Paris was no longer just occupied. It was a city rigged for destruction. When Hitler imagined Paris going down in flames, the people of the city felt something else. The occupation was weakening. By mid-August 1944, German forces in Paris were short on supplies and increasingly cut off. Rumors spread that Allied troops were sweeping across France. Inside the city, resistance networks that had spent years gathering intelligence and sabotaging quietly began to prepare for open revolt. On August 19th, they made their move. Police officers loyal to the resistance seized the police headquarters. Barricades rose across narrow streets, built from overturned cars, furniture, and paving stones torn from the roads. Parisians who had lived under occupation for 4 long years suddenly found themselves building defenses outside their own front doors. Snipers took positions in upper windows. Messages moved through apartments, cafes, and church networks. Paris was suddenly at war. German troops struck back with machine guns and artillery. Civilians were trapped in crossfire. Smoke drifted over neighborhoods that had been peaceful only days before. Families hid in basements while gunfire echoed through streets that had been filled with cafes and market stalls just days earlier. But the uprising carried a terrifying risk. If German commanders believed they were losing control, they still had Hitler's final option: destroy Paris rather than surrender it. And the explosives were already in place. As Paris fought in the streets, the armies that could save it were not rushing toward the city. After the breakout from Normandy, Allied commanders were focused on speed. Their goal was to chase the retreating German army, cross the Seine, and drive toward Germany as fast as possible. Paris, with millions of civilians and damaged infrastructure, looked like a logistical nightmare. Feeding and supplying the city could slow the entire advance. So at first, Paris was not part of the plan. But to the French, that was unthinkable. General Charles de Gaulle, leader of the Free French forces, understood that Paris was more than a military objective. It was the heart of France. If the Allies bypassed it, the resistance uprising could be crushed. Worse, chaos inside the capital might spiral into political instability just as the country was being liberated. De Gaulle pushed hard for immediate action. Reluctantly, Allied Supreme Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower agreed. He redirected the French 2nd Armored Division and elements of the U.S. 4th Infantry Division toward Paris. They began racing for the city. But inside Paris, time was running out. As Allied columns pushed toward Paris, pressure from Berlin intensified. Hitler's orders had not changed. Paris was not to fall intact into enemy hands. If it could not be held, it was to be destroyed. Bridges, rail lines, and key landmarks were all marked for demolition. The explosives were in place. The authority to use them rested with the city's commander, General Dietrich von Choltitz. He understood exactly what that meant. Von Choltitz was a career officer, loyal and experienced, but he could see the war was lost. German forces were retreating everywhere. Reinforcements were not coming. Destroying Paris would not save Germany. It would only turn one of Europe's greatest cities into rubble and guarantee his place in history as the man who did it. Still, disobeying Hitler was no small thing. In a regime built on fear, failure to carry out orders could mean death. So von Choltitz stalled. He delayed demolition orders, reported confusion, and focused on holding positions rather than blowing them apart. Every hour he hesitated brought the sound of Allied guns a little closer. On August 24, 1944, the first Allied tanks reached the outskirts of Paris. They belonged to the French 2nd Armored Division, pushing forward as fast as fuel and fighting allowed. Inside the city, resistance fighters were still battling German strongpoints, holding barricades street by street as the sound of gunfire echoed through historic neighborhoods. German control was collapsing. By the next day, Allied and Free French troops were entering Paris from multiple directions. Crowds poured into the streets, cheering, crying, and waving flags that had been hidden for 4 long years. Faced with encirclement, an uprising he could not crush, and Allied forces now inside the city, von Choltitz made his decision. On August 25th, he surrendered Paris. The bridges still stood, the charges were never detonated, the city had survived. Paris did not survive because it was safe. It survived because events moved faster than destruction. The resistance forced the moment, rising before the Germans were ready to abandon control. De Gaulle pushed the Allies to change their plans. Allied troops raced forward just in time. And at the center of it all, a German general chose hesitation over obedience. Hitler wanted a final act of spite, a ruined symbol left behind as his empire collapsed. Instead, Paris was liberated scarred but standing, its bridges intact, its landmarks still rising over the Seine. In the end, one of the world's greatest cities was saved by a narrow window of time, a chain of risky decisions, and the fact that even in total war, not everyone was willing to burn the world down.